Okay. And the big problem with pets is, of course, a lot of people live in apartments. We own some apartments. We don't allow people to have pets that aren't in cages for a logical reason. I thought, okay, I had somebody that had a cat or wanted a cat. It was a teenage girl and there was a stray cat in the neighborhood. I said, okay, you can have the cat. Cats are quiet. Cats don't leave a mess. They use the litter box and they're not destructive. They wouldn't bother the other neighbors. When they moved out, we had to replace all the carpets. The cat had not used the litter box. We had to replace some door jambs because the cat couldn't get into a room that it wanted to. It scratched the door casing and the door jamb and left big gouge marks in it, as well as the window jamb. And the girl left about 1,000 pinhole marks on the wall. That had nothing to do with the cat. We decided no more cats even. So about 36.5% of the households in the United States have one or more dogs. And only 30.4% have cats. So dogs are more popular. More later. We have a program this morning that is going to be fun. And I will start by introducing our grammarian, Laurie Whitecamp. She has a word of the day, and would you explain quickly what your duties are?
My duties as grammarian are to listen for proper use and improper use of the English language, especially like so's and ums. And the word of the day, yes, I have you written down for so already, is zomboid. And this word comes, they have increased the number, the words that they will allow in Scrabble. And this is one of the words that I thought was rather interesting, which is resembling zombies. And in the dim light, she looked at zomboid, or perhaps at this hour, many of us feel zomboid. So please try and fit it in your whatever speaking rules you have today, and I will be listening for interesting.
Thank you. So my daughter's cat is very zomboid in nature. Our timer is Svetlana Rakimova, who is coming to us via the electronic wonders of the world. Both 5 to 7 minutes. Would you like to introduce how you're going to let the speakers know their time?
Of course. At 5 minutes, I will show this beautiful rose, which is green. At 6 minutes, I will show this yellow rose, and everybody will see it. And at 7 minutes, I will show this red roses. And then in 30 seconds after that, I will start clapping. That's it.
Thank you. Our general evaluator today will be Laura Lee Norris. Laura Lee, explain what you will be doing.
As the general evaluator, I evaluate everyone that doesn't already have an evaluator. So I will evaluate the timer, the grammarian, and the Toastmaster, and table topics. And my role is mostly to say how the meeting went overall and how those who I am evaluating can improve in their roles.
Thank you. We'll have 2 speakers today. Our first speaker is Brian Haggerty. I met Brian probably about 15 years ago when he and I were both in a play called Guys and Dolls. He sang in a quartet. That guy has a great voice. Since then, Brian and I have sung in a number of plays. He played the Music Man, and I was the mayor in the Music Man. So he's not only an actor and a singer, he's a volunteer firefighter, he's an attorney, he is a woodworker, and a potter by hobby. and has been a Toastmaster for about a year now. Brian's going to be doing the first speech in the Pathways book. He's already done his icebreaker once, but his speech is the icebreaker in Pathways, version 2.0. Time will be 5 to 7 minutes. His evaluator will be Krista Colway. And the title of Brian's speech is appropriate for it being a repeat of the icebreaker. It says, sometimes the ice refreezes. Please welcome Brian Haggerty.
Well, I joined Toastmasters over a year ago. And within the first month or so, I gave an icebreaker. And then I did a couple more speeches, and I took roles in meetings, and I was pretty active. And in the last few months, you haven't heard as much from me. Now, I'm not a Pathways resistor, but I will assert that when you turn things over to computer software, you lose some of your flexibility. I finally got around to setting up my Pathways base camp, and it said I needed to do an icebreaker. But I've already done an icebreaker, I told my computer. The cursor blinked patiently. So I looked around on the website to see if there was some way that I could tell Pathways that I had already done an icebreaker. The cursor blinked patiently. Always one for the path of least resistance. I thought, fine, I'll do another icebreaker. That was showing. Anyway, when an icebreaker opens a channel, the water behind it immediately starts to freeze again. So icebreakers have to go through every once in a while in order to keep an open channel. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. So why did I go quiet all of a sudden? I joined Toastmasters in August of 2017, and in December of 2017, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I'm not saying there's a causal relationship there. Just pointing out the facts. Join Toastmasters, get cancer. More research is needed. By March, surgery was scheduled. And that's when I started to clam up. But 3 days before surgery, I found out that my health insurance had been canceled. It turns out that if you have a law degree and 20 years of experience as a lawyer, it's not actually impossible to get health insurance in America. Difficult and confusing, but not actually impossible. So by June, I had that corrected, and the surgery finally went ahead. The surgery was successful, and the patient survived, which is a twofer. I started attending Toastmaster meetings again, but I felt kind of estranged. I felt like I had let the club down. We're here to talk about our story, not hide it. Well, when I'm not well, I turtle up. I grow into myself. But sharing is why we're here. I believe I should have been making speeches about health, health insurance, about what I was experiencing. So what did I learn in my jaunt through the healthcare system? I learned that for medical treatment, you need to see a doctor. For health care, you need to talk to a nurse. And for recovery and wellness, you need to listen to yourself, to your own body. Surgeons are brilliant. They learn and they study and they practice, and the things they can do, opening your body and actually making changes with their knife, taking things out, stitching things back together, simply amazing. The doctor knows the science, and that's great. But once you're in the recovery room, the doctor is all but useless. The journals tell him that the average patient needs 6 weeks to recover and shouldn't lift more than 10 pounds. That's all they tell him. So that's all he can tell you. Now, nurses work with patients. They can read patients. They know that hurting there is no big deal. That just comes with the surgery. Or they know what's not okay and when they need to start kind of reaching for the panic button. But it's a huge relief to know that someone has that combination of knowledge and the caring and knows whether you're getting better or whether there's concern, something. Well, these days, you don't lie around in the hospital for a long time. They've got you up a few hours after surgery, and they're kicking you out the door the day after. So now there's no more nurses to help you with your recovery. What do? Well, you've got your discharge instructions. 6 weeks, don't lift more than 10 pounds. Not terribly helpful. You can check the internet, and what you'll find is 6 weeks, don't lift more than 10 pounds. But finally, it hit me. I can decide to be a patient, or I can go back to being a person. I can search for instructions on the internet, or I can ask my body, what the hell do you need from me? Healing is the result of an affirmative decision, an affirmative act, an intentional act. I'm going to be a healthy person. So for me, recovery meant getting back to my life, back to work, back to the fire department, back to the rec center, back to Toastmasters, back to breaking ice.
Thank you, Brian. Please write a little note to Brian, tell him what you thought that he did well. And seeing how he's doing his icebreaker again, go light on what he could improve on. I didn't mention that 3.1% of households have birds. Of the people who have dogs, there's an average of 1.6 per home. We had 2 dogs for a while, so I know that the Norrises have a couple of dogs. They're agreeing. And it seems like if you have a second dog, the first one is happier when you're gone all day long, or they can get into trouble together. What one doesn't think of, the other one does. People who have cats tend to have 2.1 cats per home. So there are more. I haven't seen a 0.1 cat in any home that I've been. Anyway, there are people who have cats tend to have multiples more than people who have dogs. And then there are exotic pets, but we'll get into that a little bit later because we're going to introduce our second speaker. It's Dave Kaufman. Dave's been a member of Toastmasters for over 10 years, close to 15? Over 20. Wow. Didn't realize it was that long. Dave is a former contestant in the International Speech Contest, went all the way to the top on that one, so he's an excellent speaker. But when I introduce Dave, one of the things that impresses me the most is Dave is a Vietnam veteran. And I appreciate his service. He's working on the number 2 pathway speech, be 5 to 7 minutes. And Kathleen will be his evaluator. And the title of his speech is Critical Mass. Please welcome Dave Kaufman.
Gotta get rid of that last little bit of salad that's getting in. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Critical mass is a scientific term that has to do with nuclear reactions. We most commonly associate it with uranium, U-235, I think it is. And there's an isotope of that, 236. When you've got an extra electron, you have a radioactive element. And what's happening is when you've got so many electrons going around this nucleus, and especially when you get an extra one, they start to collide with one another. And when they collide with one another, they knock one electron off of this molecule onto the next molecule of the same element. And if you do that in a large enough quantity, you produce what they call critical mass, which is a release of energy. If you can control that, it's good energy. We get electricity from that sort of thing. When you get to a point in critical mass where you've got so many of these exchanges of electrons going on all at the same time, you have a nuclear explosion, which is a bad thing. What's happening is you're converting matter to energy. And so that's why there's such great energy in that. Quite a long time ago, about 25 years ago or so, I was involved in a youth ministry program at Sacred Heart Church. And I was replacing somebody that had let the program go down to where we didn't have any high school kids involved anymore, high school or middle school kids involved anymore. I was in fact down to 5 kids. I had those 5 kids trapped because their parents wanted them to receive one of the sacraments, and they had to go through the catechism class in order to get that, receive the sacrament of confirmation. But they didn't really want to be there either. And it was kind of like a bunch of zomboids sitting out there because while I'm trying to teach them about their faith, they're just kind of staring at me and letting me know that I'm only here because my parents are making me here because they want me. I mean, one of the kids had to be bribed. His parents had to promise him a car when he finished so that he would go through the program. And he went through the program. But I realized that this is not going to work. This is all that's happened here. I've got to figure out a way to make things happen. And so I started reading about youth groups. These days, kids don't have to go to school. In my day, kids went through catechism class all the way through senior and high school because their parents made them do it. These days, parents give them a choice, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But if they've got a choice, you've got to have a reason to bring them into this program. They've got to enjoy what they're doing there. They've got to be able to get something out of it. And I didn't have a better idea with these kids at the time. I started to do a lot of reading. And I came up, somebody wrote a piece that talked about getting so many kids together. You have some catalyst to make it happen. But you get so many kids together, and you add the catalyst of food, fun, and friends. Invite them to bring their friends. Not just have an extra class away from class, but actually create some fun. So we'd have what we call dumb games. The kids always called them dumb games, but they enjoyed playing the dumb games, and so that was fun. And then I'd always have a little bit of food for them to snack on. And then in between, I'd sneak in some actual religious education, and they enjoyed it. And they would invite their friends, and their friends would come. And they actually enjoyed it. And then they would invite their friends to come. And all of a sudden, we had some kids. We had enough kids there. They were kind of bouncing off each other, just like those molecules in the uranium atom. They're just bouncing off the walls there after a while. And they're having a lot of fun, and they're learning things, and they want to be there. And it took me 2 years to go from 5 to 35 kids in that class, in that group. And it was an awesome group. We had a lot of fun. Using this principle of critical mass, I'd come in, and one of the games we like to play was called chain reaction. That has to do with the theme. The chain reaction is we all hold hands and close eyes. I'd have one kid start by squeezing a hand. And then the person next to him would squeeze the hand, the person next to him would squeeze the hand. And it would go all the way around the room, unless somebody on this side decided to squeeze the other hand. And in which case they'd go. So when the two places meet, you have a little bit of explosion. The other guy kind of, what do I do now? And so he squeezes both hands. And so they come back up the other direction. And then you get somebody else to squeeze a hand. And it gets, after a while, almost like a nuclear explosion, because nobody's sure what they're doing. They're just bouncing off the walls, and they're having a great time. And then the next time we have a meeting, and I say, well, it's time to play a game. Oh, no, not dumb games again. And somebody say, play chain reaction. And they ended up getting a lot of their favorite games. So it turns out all the kids would say they hated the dumb games. But if I had a meeting without the dumb games, guess what? It just wasn't working. I was really proud that we had this, all of a sudden, a really successful program, that Food, Fun, and Friends was the catalyst, but it actually kept people coming. When I knew that I was finally totally successful is when one of the parents punished their kid by not letting them come to our youth group. And I said, I went to the parents and explained, this is really important that they get this education. This isn't just fun time and fun and games time. It's important. Please figure out some other way to punish your kid. So when you've got to punish a kid by not letting them go to the youth group, you know you've got a successful program. That chain reaction is the controlled chain reaction. We didn't quite have an explosion, but we were oftentimes close to it, and it was a lot of fun. And that program is what Sacred Heart still does today, and it's still going great guns.
Thank you, Dave. That was, we found that we need critical mass in Toastmasters as well.
Exactly. I gave a speech to the other club, and I connected Toastmasters to it, saying this is what we need to do for our Toastmasters club, because they only got 8 people. Period.
And that's about the critical.
That's
In
the
fact, that's a
minimum.
little below critical mass.
That's the minimum.
If you have the club get so low that people have to do 2 jobs or they have to speak every week, then they burn out. And if somebody's not there, it doesn't go. So that's why Toastmasters sets 20 as the goal, so that if somebody doesn't come, then it works out. So please write notes to Dave and pass them on. We'll ask our timer to give us the times of the speeches. Svetlana,
Yes, I'm ready.
the time.
I felt a little bit like a zomboid because after I timed Brian, I thought, hold on, he's delivering an icebreaker, and icebreaker is 4 to 6 minutes, not 5 to 7 minutes. But Brian did really, really well. He finished at 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Very good.
Yes, and Dave, with his critical mass, achieved critical mass at 6 minutes and 49 seconds. Thank you.
We are supposed to have Ruth as our table topics master, and I guess she didn't come this week again. So Brian is going to be our step-in last-minute table topics person, and he has to leave early, so he might not be able to present the trophy.
Right, so
Would you ask the lady sitting next to you?
I was gonna say,
present the trophy.
she'll present the trophy when we're done. We'll just send the votes down here if we have more than 2 speakers, 2 table topics. So,
Okay. We're down to about where 2 is going
Okay.
to be the amount.
excellent.
So
So I am going to ask Kathleen, tell us a time when you experienced a zomboid cat or dog.
Fellow Toastmasters, a zomboid dog or cat seems to be more typical than not. I have known very brilliant dogs that understand exactly what you tell them. They do wonderful things for you, fetching the paper, bringing you your slippers without eating them, and so forth. But the dogs that we seem to have are not that way. They do tend to be zomboid in nature. Leah's mentioned before that with our dog that we have now, we had expected the smartness of a poodle and the cuddliness of a cocker, and we got a non-cuddling, not very smart dog. He's so entertaining. That is the thing. He absolutely loves his tennis ball. And you know that you've been accepted into the house if he brings you his ball so that you can throw it. And his favorite thing to do is to chase it down the stairs. And he's getting a little older now, and so now we do maybe 5 or 6 times, but it used to be over and over again. Actually, I think that if I'd have kept it up, I might have turned out to be a very good pitcher for the Yankees because it takes energy to get that ball far enough away for him to chase it. And yet, going outside, he's not the least bit interested in this ball. We can throw it, he'll go check it out, make sure it's still there, and then go off and do something else. He knows his name, but like the little kids that we had in the University Village when we were leaving there, we always knew that the little kids knew their names. When Mom would call, Charlie, and Charlie would dash out the door bare naked and not come back. Oreo does not come back when he is called. He comes back when he feels like it or when he is told, come get a cookie. These are very important in his life. We learned that we have to snap them in two now because he's constantly getting them as a reward. But again, entertaining. He does, now that he's getting older, like to snuggle. He likes to bring us his ball to throw. He's so cute. He's got some soft toys that he likes to snuggle with, just like a little baby and curled up. That's so cute. And so actually having a zomboid dog, not such a bad idea.
I used to have a cock-a-doodle.
My dad told me when I was quite young the difference between a cat and a dog. He said, a dog will jump on your bed because he loves you. A cat will jump on the bed because it loves the bed. So, Krista, tell us, cat or dog, and why?
My answer is both. There is something to love about the feline and the canine. And I grew up with both. My parents always had a dog, and I must admit it was their dog. It was always their dog, and to me it was just a smelly animal that lived in the house. And all I ever did for it was give it a bath, because I just didn't want it to smell anymore. I was more the cat person. And when I was a little tiny toddler, my parents adopted a cat. And then when I was older, that cat was older too and didn't play. And so I begged and coerced my father into allowing me to bring home this little barn cat, this kitten. And he was so worried about it. He said, no barn cat's going to be in our house. It's going to go to the bathroom all over, all these problems. But that was a great cat. And it did use the litter box. And you would think it would have caught mice for us, but it was afraid of mice. One point in time, my dad found a mouse and he threw it in the snow, and then he threw the cat on the mouse, and the cat was appalled and just came tearing back into the house. So as an adult, it took a long time before I was in a position to own a pet, and I adopted a cat. And then when I bought a house, that's where the rest of the pets came from. I got more cats. Then I finally got the dog. Then another dog came into her life, and another cat, and another cat. So we were up to, at one point in time, 4 cats and 2 dogs. And I have to say, I enjoyed the energy in the house, the distanceness of the cats who might choose to get some affection, and of course the neediness of the dog. And I would say no home is complete without both.
Thank you. So, Lana, could we have this times of the table topic speeches?
Sure. Kathleen delivered her table topic in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and Krista finished at 1 minute and 57 seconds.
Thank you. Please tear off a piece of paper and pass it down to Brian.
And if they want to vote, they can let Laura Lee know.
Yes. If you're online and you want to vote, please let Laura Lee know whom you're voting for. Do we still have Christina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all I see is names or something across there.
Yes, because she is driving. So she just has her profile up.
Oh, okay. That's inside of her car.
What?
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I hear you.
We got your voice. So our first evaluator for Brian, yeah, Brian's speech. I should put them down. I had to remember which one went first. Is going to be Krista. Please welcome Krista.
This may be an icebreaker, but no, I'm not going to go easy. We know Brian is capable of fantastic speeches, and I enjoyed this one. I love how you always bring humor, even to things that are dark and serious. And what you went through is obviously very serious, but I appreciate that and how you always bring it in, even your titles. I always love your speech titles. I love how you brought that into the icebreaker analogy in. You always seem very calm, cool, and collected when you're up here. Your gestures, I thought, were very good. They weren't too fast. They went and flowed with what you were talking about. Your speaking rate is always good. You have very good timing. There were a few filler words, more so than I think I've heard before, but just a few. I mean, I could count probably on one hand. For something to work on next time, at the very beginning, you were looking straight down, and we didn't see that great eye contact from you. Towards the middle, there was more eye contact going on, but at the very beginning in particular, I think it's very important to connect with the audience and to have that beginning memorized and ready to go. And then as you need, quickly look down at notes. And pathways and your frustrations with it, I totally understand, as I am procrastinating still myself. I do know, though, that there are evaluation forms online. So if we're doing a pathway speech, we should try to print those and bring it in so the evaluator has the form to fill out. That's something different than what we've had to do before when we had the books and we could just hand the books over. And I feel like this was a fantastic icebreaker because, you kind of have been absent. You poke in, but it's like I've missed your speeches. And for you to fill us in on that story, it really was like a reintroduction to the club. So it was, I appreciate that you did that and that you included us in that. And I look forward to many more. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our evaluator for Dave's speech is Kathleen. Please welcome Kathleen Ritzman.
Fellow Toastmasters, as you know by now, that I really do enjoy Dave's speeches. Dave has a very subtle way of including humor, and if one is not listening really closely, we tend to miss that. And so I'm always listening to see where that is going to come in, which is, of course, the most enjoyable part to me of Dave's speeches. He is very, think of the right word here, self-effacing when he gives his speeches. And so instead of telling us today that I was so awesome, I created this critical mass, instead he was talking more about the kids and the kinds of things that they did. And the only real major part for him was the research that he did in order to be able to make the great activities happen for him. He's got a good child psychologist too. This is not easy to do when you're so much older than the kids are. And the fact that he understood what it was like to be a kid was really awesome. I think that if I were going to be giving this speech, there are two things that I would do differently. The first one is, A, because you didn't want the lectern, you tended to move back and forth during the time of your speech, which was not bad, except that sometimes you'd stop moving back and forth, and then you'd start again. And so that's what made it kind of obvious that that's what you were doing, and it was not an addition to what you were saying. The other thing is you began with the idea of critical mass. And I'm thinking that I wasn't so far off when I said it might be a Catholic speech, because it was critical for these kids to be able to prepare for that opportunity that would come their way. But I think had it been me, I would have coordinated that great introduction with what the kids were doing a little bit quicker. because I felt like I'm still listening for a nuclear explanation, and I didn't get it until quite a way into the speech. The thing is, though, as you were talking, I feel like you gave some excellent advice to all of us anytime that we're working, not only with kids, but I think with adults as well, that it's really good to have food, fun, and friends all at the same time. And so look at us here at Toastmasters. What do? Food, fun, and friends, and other opportunities that we have to be in a group. I know that with teachers, when we all get together, first thing, who's bringing groceries? You know, we'd like to have something. And so it was just very nice to have that feeling that we have here at Toastmasters enhanced by the kinds of things that you were sharing with us. I think, too, that the idea of dumb games, the way that you used Zomboid, the controlled chain reaction, all of these were wonderful phrases that tied your whole speech together. So all in all, excellent job. Thank you.
Tight quarters here. Passing the. You ever find it's hard to clap and carry your books at the same time? Svetlana, could we have the times for the evaluators?
Of course. Krista's evaluation took 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and Kathleen's evaluation took 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Very good. Thank you. While you're, if you haven't sent in your notes to the table topics, please make sure that's done. In the meantime, we're going to have a grammarians report. So put me down for a soda there. And welcome Laurie for the grammarians report. We'll find out how we get for being zombies.
We did a fantastic job on using the word of the day. I heard Zomboid from Lee. Svetlana, for how little she spoke, was fantastic. Dave got it in. Brian Norris got it in. Kathleen managed to fit it in 3 times. We also had some really wonderful terminology. Krista used coerced, appalled, although you said distance this, which I'm not sure is really a
That's
word.
a good word.
I love the twist of phrase for Brian Haggerty using icebreaker as the speech and icebreaker as the ship. Also his causal relationships to fur, to turtle up. You started your speech with several sentences where you got when you're explaining nuclear reactions. But it got a little bit repetitive, but I loved your dumb games. And Kathleen managed to fit in self-face. Always nice to hear. Thank you.
Patty, would you like to present the award for the best table topic?
So, to let you all know, I'm not a complete zomboid, and I am paying attention. I counted, and Kathleen.
Thank you.
It was close.
Everybody's taking a picture
Wait for the
today.
camera.
Oh, okay. We'll do across here. What you can do is shake it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Send the photo bomb, guys.
And now Laura Lee will give us a general evaluator's report. We'll find out how I did. It's easier, go ahead, yes.
Yeah. There we go. Now the camera can see me. I thought all in all the meeting went very smooth, and we had a few good introductions. I know you missed my dad's introduction at the very beginning, I think because you were waiting for Ruth. So that made sense, and I did like that you kept reminding us to write the notes and make sure that you remember to vote. There were a lot of good reminders, which I think sometimes when you're doing it yourself, you don't necessarily remember to tell other people to do it, which I thought was good. For Krista, I really liked the humor that you were started out with, just to kind of bring everyone back to attention after what you did with table topics. I liked that. And you did a great job looking at the audience. I think you had been told that once before, because you made a specific point to look not just at Brian Haggerty, but also at the camera and the other people who were sitting there. So I really liked that. And one of the things that I did notice and I put down was you didn't specifically reference a pathways form. Good to know that you didn't have one. Kathleen, I also liked that you started out with a very positive note and you also ended with one. And that you, the one thing that I did notice, you didn't specifically reference the speech. I also noticed you don't have a pathways form. So that is something for us all to remember if you're giving a speech, pathways form. And overall, I thought that the meeting went very smooth, and I liked how much you referenced the time as well. You specifically asked for times multiple times throughout the meeting, and I really like when my speech has its time written on the forms that I'm giving back. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And my next note says return control of the meeting to the presiding officer, which is Krista. So I didn't know it was out of control, but I will return control.
You now return control of your television set.
And last minute additions on the sign up.